The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, thank you for joining us for this session, Schools Are Leading, a closer look at districts getting to zero energy. I am Connie Umphris, Communications Manager at New Buildings Institute. Before we begin, I have a couple of housekeeping things to tell you about. First, you are muted and we cannot hear you. This helps keep the background noise down so that everyone can better hear the speakers. I want to direct you to the dashboard that you should be able to see on the right-hand side of your screen. If you are having technical difficulties and cannot hear the slides or see the slides or hear our speakers, you can use the question pane in this dashboard to let us know, and we will help you as we go. Please ask questions in the question pane as they come up. We will take questions at the end of the presentation. As the webinar session ends, you will be given the opportunity to take a short survey. This is where you will enter your AIA number if you are seeking continuing education credit, or let us know if you are in need of a certificate. You'll receive a follow-up email tomorrow with links to the recording and slides for this session. Today's speakers are Amy Cortez, Program Director here at NBI, and Tony Hans, CMTA's National Director of Sustainable Projects. We also have NBI Project Manager Riley Loveland on hand to introduce the topic today and today's speakers. Riley, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Connie. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar in our Getting to Zero Schools webinar series. So in this specific webinar, we'll be highlighting the National Zero Energy School projects and their path to zero. And I want to say just a quick note, thank you, Connie, for letting people know how the pane works on the right-hand side. There will be a video in this webinar, and the video needs to play through a computer to be able to hear the sound. You'll be able to see it, let's say if you have the app up on your phone, but the sound works through computer. So this is a great time to figure out and plug into your computer if you need to. And we'll also remind you once we get to the video that this is the case. We'll provide a link later on to the video if you are only able to access this via your phone. So for those seeking AIA education credits, the learning objectives for this webinar include that participants will be able to understand the national status of zero energy buildings and the fundamental principles of getting to zero energy in the built environment. They will be able to describe the best practices and key components of zero energy building success based on real-world experiences of school districts that are pursuing and achieving zero energy schools. Participants will also be able to build on the real-world experiences of school districts in their efforts to engage stakeholders in their community. And participants will be able to apply planning and technical tools needed to achieve successful zero energy project planning, contracting, design, construction, and operations. Now let's get going. So today's presenters, I'd like to introduce you to Amy Cortez. She's the Director of Programs at New Buildings Institute here. She's been involved in sustainable design consulting and implementation of energy efficiency market transformation approaches for over 20 years. She is responsible for managing implementation teams covering all aspects of NBI's work. And Tony Hans, as CMTA's National Director of Sustainable Projects, he works with architects and owners to increase the potential of projects to be sustainable. He's worked on the majority of CMTA's zero energy projects, including Richardsville Elementary School, which is the first zero energy public school in the United States. Mr. Hans speaks at many regional and national conferences on the subject of zero energy buildings, and if you get a chance to see him speak in person, I highly recommend it. Amy, on to you.
Great, thank you. So for those of you who are not familiar, NBI is a national nonprofit that works to reduce energy consumption and carbon emissions in the building sector. So we research and define best practices for high performance buildings and then try to translate these into innovative and practical solutions for building professionals, energy efficiency programs, state and local government. For many years, NBI has been researching zero energy buildings. These are energy efficient buildings that use on-site renewable sources to produce as much energy as they consume over the course of the year. We started this tracking in 2012 when many people believed zero energy buildings weren't even possible. Yet we knew of examples through our work in the industry, so we started counting and studying them. Since 2012, we've seen a 700% growth in this new market of getting to zero in buildings. We now count over 550 buildings with 82 verified at zero energy, and more than 475 that are aiming for this aspirational goal. Our research has allowed us to uncover patterns and commonalities in these early adopters who've proven that dramatic energy reductions combined with renewable energy sources are not only possible, but in many cases, they're also cost effective. Over the course of our work, we've collected a number of terms for zero energy buildings. In some places it's ZNE, other places it's just zero energy, other places it's net zero energy. US DOE has a zero energy ready residential standard, and they use a zero energy source definition for commercial. So what all these definitions really have in common is they are really start with the foundation of an energy efficient building and then offset the rest with renewable energy. We also know of a number of certifications like the International Living Future Institute certifications, a Passive House standard, and even the USGBC recently announced a zero energy and zero carbon certification. One really important distinction in the definition of zero energy, and we're talking about energy use intensity, is this definition between site energy and source energy. So site energy is the energy as it's measured around the boundary of the building, whereas source energy really takes into account the upstream energy that's lost during the transmission, generation, and distribution. So generally, source energy is about 2 to 3 times higher than site energy, and it varies depending on where you are. In the NBI's Getting to Zero list of 500 or more buildings, the educational sector is definitely leading. Educational facilities represent more than 1/3 of all the buildings that have either a verified result of zero energy, shown here in green, or have a goal to achieve zero, which are shown as zero energy emerging in blue. NBI is proud to announce that we've subsegmented our broader list, and we're publishing just today our 2019 School Zero Energy Watch List. So this is a way to raise public awareness about the districts and teams that are on a path to zero. There is available for download. The link is there at the bottom, and it serves as a tool to connect interested districts to those with experience with zero energy. One of the things you'll notice on the schools watch list is that it's not just schools. It's actually made up of libraries, science classrooms, auditoriums, or additions. But K-12 schools make up about half of the educational buildings that are on the list. NBI's documented examples of educational facilities across all climate zones, although it makes sense that the milder climate zones are where we see the bulk of the buildings to date. And it might be expected that about 1/4 of the projects are in California. However, states like Kentucky, Massachusetts, Oregon, and Texas also have robust activity around zero energy schools. From our research, we've learned that successful projects start with a vision and a goal and a champion that ensures this vision is achieved. We've seen this role of the energy champion as somebody who makes sure the goal is not forgotten, especially when tough decisions come up during the design and construction process. The champion is there to really remind the owner and the rest of the design and construction team that the goal is important and that the energy savings features of the building remain throughout the design, construction, and even after value engineering. The rest of these the steps that are outlined here on this slide, we're going to go through each of them because we think of these as like the common themes that happen in most of the zero energy projects that we've studied. So the idea starts with this champion, and it might be a school board member, an architect, engineer, or sustainability director. But regardless of how this goal emerges, it's necessary for the champion to gain support from others, both inside and outside of the school district. Our research suggests that tours of nearby facilities that are pursuing zero energy, especially with board members, business officials, capital projects managers, or facility managers, having these folks tour the buildings can help convince them to pursue a zero energy goal. If you can't tour a building, we have some video case studies here that you can use to really highlight that these buildings are achievable. We also find that case studies and fact sheets are helpful to communicate with key decision makers. And at the end of my short little presentation here, we'll have a link to the Getting to Zero School Resources Hub that has a number of case studies. One might be most applicable to your particular project. And when you're advocating and talking to your stakeholders, it's important to be prepared with information about how these schools improve student performance. We know that they're healthier and they contribute to a more productive atmosphere for students and staff. So we've compiled a bunch of research that supports this so that you can help make the case to your stakeholders that zero energy schools is a really important goal that's achievable in your district. Another thing that we've found in our research is that zero energy schools set an energy use intensity target as a goal. The National Renewable Energy Lab has established EUI targets for schools in all U.S. climate zones through energy modeling. Their suggested range of EUI targets actually aligns well with the data from the projects with verified data in NBI's Getting to Zero list. They both point to a site energy target for schools between 17 and 23 kilobtu per square foot per year. Another important finding in our research is the way these zero energy projects set goals. They use an absolute energy target rather than relying on this % better than code approach that's often used in green building projects. This energy target is not only does it provide a goal for the design team, but it also sets an operational target for the facilities group after the building is occupied and operating. So this kind of change from % better than to an absolute energy target is one of the key themes that we think is important for teams pursuing energy, zero energy projects. These energy targets we're finding are now being utilized in policies and practices across districts. So, for example, districts are incorporating them into goals and master plans. So, for example, this is from San Francisco Unified School District, where they have a goal that all of their school buildings will use less than 20 kilobtu per square foot per year by the year 2040. Energy targets and mention of zero energy is also showing up in requests for proposals. So even before the design team is selected, owners and school districts in this case are putting the aspirational goal for zero energy right alongside their desire to pursue LEED standards or the LEED rating system goals in their request for proposal. This is important because it really brings up the topic early and puts the teams that are actually submitting proposals on notice that the district is interested in this aggressive level of energy performance. So this one is actually a project in the District of Columbia as an example. San Francisco also has a great example of what's called Owner's Project Requirements. That's a tool where districts provide a narrative that explains what they're looking for in their new building or a major renovation project. And so, like for San Francisco and other districts are starting to incorporate that energy target, that goal of an energy target that clarifies, you know, what kind of energy reductions are needed in major renovations, and also what energy performance is expected of new construction projects. NBI has really good examples of each of these types of uses of energy targets on that Getting to Zero resource hub that we'll have a link to later in the presentation. Contracting may also be a little bit different in zero energy schools. We're starting to see energy targets make their way into public projects using what's called a performance-based procurement approach. So this is when the energy targets are explicitly mentioned in the contract documents, and it puts the design and construction team kind of on the hook for the energy outcomes. And that's an important way to ensure the goals are met. So the National Renewable Energy Lab actually used this process in their resource support facilities building, and they have some best practices guides that's also available on the Resource Hub. The commissioning and controls integration are really important to include in the contracting documents. And we're also seeing power purchase agreements, or PPAs, which are a contractual mechanism that some districts use to take the cost of solar kind of off the bottom line, and that allows a third party to develop and operate a photovoltaic system with a guaranteed utility rate for the district. So those are some of the contractual mechanisms that districts are using to get to their energy target. Integrated design is fundamental in all of the zero energy projects that we know about. Integrated design optimizes for both cost and ongoing energy performance, and it's really key to success. Teams sometimes use what we call early shoebox energy modeling, where early design decision with big important decisions like building form, orientation, or mechanical system selection are compared early in the design to see which one uses the least absolute amount of energy. This is very different than a code compliance model where the baseline looks exactly like the final building with different systems. Zero energy buildings that we research are not overly complicated. One theme that designers bring up when we talk to them is the keep it super simple KISS approach. They use technologies that are readily available today with attention to efficient outcome and a low first cost. Here are some of the common technologies that we've seen. Besides LED lighting and renewables, there are many variations on approaches. We do notice that space conditioning is separate often from ventilation systems, and we know that plug load management becomes a really important part, because when you ratchet down the energy consumption from lighting, envelope, and mechanical systems, the plug loads are actually about half of what's left. So, and then another commonality we see among these buildings is that they use an air barrier test to ensure a very tight envelope. And that's a really important consideration in zero energy projects. These buildings also operate efficiently, and they are looking at their actual energy performance. So they're not just designed to be zero, but they're also operating at zero. Thankfully, engaging occupants in schools can be really fun and educational. So many zero energy schools have a green team and teachers who are excited about using the building itself and the energy performance that the energy results every month, or in real time, to learn about their school, their building, and their environment. So I've mentioned a couple times the Getting to Zero School Resources Hub. This is an outstanding place to find policies, programs, strategies for school districts that are pursuing zero energy. We've curated a bunch of documents that we've seen. We've collected requests for proposals while they're available for a brief amount of time on somebody else's website, and asked for their permission to put them on ours so that they serve as examples and starting places for other districts who are interested in pursuing this. So, so we want to make sure you're aware of that as a resource for you. And with that quick summary of some of what NBI has learned in our research, I'd like to hand it off to Tony Hams from CMTA to learn more about their process they've used to achieve zero energy in new construction. Tony?
Hey, Tony, we're not hearing you.
Okay, how about now?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. All right, thank you guys. So Riley, that was just a phenomenal lead in. You know, thank you guys so much. Really, the amount of research that NBI is doing to further the progression of zero energy buildings nationwide is amazing. And I think that as we all look to where the building industry is going, we all see that projects are progressing towards zero energy. And as an industry, us pulling that all together and continuing to raise the bar on every project is what is pushing that up. So I feel honored to be a part of it, and thanks for the invite, and we'll dig into some discussion that we were having on zero energy buildings and really some regional transformation we were seeing on zero energy. And here we go. Okay, so progression through that, we're really looking at zero energy projects and the zero energy projects that we have nationwide. And of those, we see a lot of, I'm sorry, slides are, there we go. And so a lot of these projects have come around the school market. Schools have a unique opportunity to really lead the nation in zero energy projects indefinitely. I think that we've had many projects, zero energy projects, that are also connecting to the why of the building. And when I say that, what I mean is every owner has a vision statement of their company, and they're building a building to use that building to fulfill that goal. And zero energy often can play a part in extending that why. So we've seen in office buildings that zero energy buildings owners are using that to hire better employees, to find those best employees that are out there. In retail projects, we're seeing owners connect that to sales. And if I can interest the buyer to come to, say, a Toyota dealership because it's a zero energy dealership, then that's going to increase my sales. We've seen lab spaces in higher ed connect with the environmental stewardship, multifamily, really connect to how you're living and what you're trying to do. But with schools, there's such an opportunity to connect with the learning and to improve learning in the space. And so it's a great opportunity, and we've seen most of that growth because of that opportunity to connect. Now, nationally, we're seeing zero energy projects progress, but we've also seen a direct connection to one specific area that we call the DMV, so the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And over the last 7 years, there's been a huge increase of about 1 million square feet of zero energy projects in that area. And that regional transformation definitely didn't happen with one direction or with one owner, with one advocate, with one engineer or architectural team. It happened with multiple groups all heading in the same direction and progressively raising that bar. So as we talk through that, we'll look at the map of zero energy projects and walk through how this transformation happened and how it's changed some owners' approaches to zero energy buildings. And maybe it's an opportunity for other owners throughout the country to look at well, if we're doing it here in an area where it's very expensive to build schools and very challenging to build them in a timely fashion, then maybe we can do it everywhere else. And so the list of schools that we've participated in that I have good data off of is the list that you're seeing here to the left. You're going to average about 800,000 square feet. And then there's a couple other projects that help push that over 1 million. So this started with Discovery Elementary. We won't go into too many details with Discovery, very well documented through MBI and a lot of other groups. But I will say that project as a whole started with a project that was going to achieve a good school on budget and achieve LEED Silver. And that's the majority of the projects we see across the country. What happened was the design team, the owner, everyone came together and said, let's see how far we can push this. Let's see what we can do without raising cost, and let's see what we can have driving this that allows us to reach a higher bar. The project had two priorities. First, everything had to be connected to learning, every individual component. And secondly, we talked about the opportunity for zero energy to connect to that why, zero energy to connect to learning. And zero energy became a secondary driver. So when we would make a decision, every decision on the project was based on learning. Everything that was done, you had to look at the learning opportunity coming off of it, but we also evaluated the energy component and the energy decision. And so the project, here we go. So the project was wedged in an existing site. It did pay attention to a south-facing facade. We really focused on drastic reduction of air infiltration, a lot of air barrier testing, verification on site by the architectural team, and just the amount of hours VMDO did this project and the amount of hours they spent on site verifying just the openings and the enclosure system was enormous. And it really led to great success in the air barrier system, drastic energy reduction of the HVAC loads, and the building performed much better than even expected. The typical schools for that owner were running at a 66 energy use intensity in the past. This project set a goal of getting around a 20 energy use intensity number, and has been performing for 3.5, 4 years from a 14, 15 to 16 EUI range. So exceeding the goals of the energy consumption, and it's been net positive since the day that it was open. The driver that led to the connection to learning was creating a curriculum integration system that pulled a live 3D virtual reality environment and allowed teachers and students to have live access to the data that was being acquired through the building. And so not only can they talk about LED lighting, not only can they talk about the HVAC system, but they can immediately pull that up and base their homework, base their lesson plans on the data coming off of that system live. So really a great connection to learning that was improved off, and this video here talks about it. So remember, if you're not hearing the sound, be sure to turn that up on your computer. Okay, and so as we bounce from California now to Boston, on controls, very good, by the way, to the MBI guys that controlled that and made that work. We'll talk quickly about process and everything that Riley mentioned on really setting up an energy champion, really diving in and setting up the OPR and BOD of a project so that you're prioritizing selecting a team, selecting a contractor, grabbing someone that has the experience to be able to lead this process is very important. But as you look into that zero energy process, I think there's an infinite loop of data-driven design that encourages groups to achieve zero energy. You've got to start out by tracking in the energy consumption of your building, whether it's office, retail, multifamily, or schools, but trying to drive down the energy consumption has to be driven by constant energy tracking of your projects. And pushing that into this infinite loop of data-driven design can help you to find out where the energy using systems are and then drastically cut those consumers. So what we typically recommend is you start out with a deep dive energy study of everything going on in the building. So let's find out where energy is, where it's being used in the building on a typical basis. This takes a lot of in-depth studies of existing structures. So going into a building, maybe you've got a prototype that you're trying to redo and finding out where energy is going with that existing user and the typical way that they proceed with using a building. From there, the modeling is imperative. So it's going to drive down energy consumption components based on the energy breakouts that you saw and the consumption pieces. Cost shifting is a tool that we typically use to where we can drive a better envelope system. We can start to reduce our HVAC system costs, and you can balance that out. You can get a better providing system than if you were to just do the legally worst that you're allowed to do and just meeting code. Increase the thermal envelope, minimize air infiltration, right-size the HVAC system to drop that cost and cost shifts over to a better providing and a better performing system. What's going to come out of that model is the individual savings out of each of those dividers and each of those breakdowns. Drastic reduction of kitchen load in a school is imperative. So we talk about those process loads. They're not just plug loads and people plugging things in. Process loads and plug loads are consuming an enormous amount of our building consumption, but it may be kitchen loads, it may be elevator loads, it may be refrigerator loads, printer loads, TV loads, ITAV system loads. So studying those components, driving those down, and getting paradigm shifts in each of those is going to be imperative to getting the energy reduction goals that you're looking at. From there, you've got to go into the metrics of building sciences. So here we're showing the building pressurization test that is coming off of the Discovery project. So where a typical code may look at 600 CFM per 1,000 square foot of building envelope as a code minimum, new codes are looking at 400. This project performed at 110. So drastic energy reduction or drastic air infiltration leakage. Then go into the operations and maintenance and your O&M measurement and verification to track that month by month. Be transparent about where you saw energy on a monthly basis going, taking those utility bills. So you don't want to find out at month 12 that you didn't reach your goal. You want to look at month 1, month 2, month 3, and correlate that to your energy model through the progression of the year to find if you're on target to hit or achieve your goals. And then be transparent about that. Find out where you designed that to be and then how much that consumed. I'm going to talk about the Wild Lake project here in a little bit. Wild Lake Middle School, they set an energy goal of a 20.3, drastic paradigm shifts across the board with all the users with Howard County schools, and Howard County knocked it out of the park. The AE team on that project knocked it out of the park, and the project ran at a 13.8, 13.9 EUI. So drastic reduction for a middle school and one of the best, if not the best performing middle schools in the country. So take that and push that back into the next design, push that. And that's what was done between Discovery and Wild Lake. So the discovery project team then went to Howard County up in Baltimore and was asked to collaborate with the architect of record and the engineer of record, TCA Architects and Posey Engineers in Baltimore for the Wild Lake project. The goal was to take a standard prototype middle school performing in the 60, 65 EUI range and to get that down to a 20 EUI. So massive reductions. And not only did the AE team there, TCA and Posey, do a great job, but Howard County knocked it out of the park. What Howard County did was they brought in sort of a top-down approach. They brought in the assistant superintendent, they brought in head of facilities, and did an ask across the entire user team, IT, kitchen staff, those teachers, principals using the building, facilities maintenance guys. They challenged them to be a part of the success of the project. And the change in view, instead of, why is this pushed onto me and how do I have to change? Why do I have to do things different from what I'm doing? Turned into that group saying, how can I be a part of the success of this project achieving zero energy? And that's what you saw at Wild Lake. You saw, a 13.8 EUI out of a middle school is just absolutely phenomenal. It's a 106,000 square foot middle school, a great space to visit if anybody's up in the area. From there, we really wanted to roll over to Baltimore City. So the Maryland Energy Alliance had created a funding mechanism for all three of these projects, for Wild Lake, for Graceland, and for Holabird. And the intent for the state was to show that zero energy was possible and to influence design in the region. And I would say they were successful. Coming off the Wild Lake project, we were actually challenged to design and commission Graceland and Holabird elementary schools, two sister schools that are less than a mile apart, right in the Inner Harbor. And Grimm and Parker Architects, just experts in school design, architects on the project. And what we were able to do with Baltimore City was incentivize everyone on the team to achieve something that wasn't being achieved in the rest of their projects. They're in a $1 billion school process currently, and they were setting these two projects aside to try to make them go zero energy. And so we were able to, under the veil of being zero energy, we were able to take different steps in this process. We were able to say, well, we want to hire a contractor CM team that has experience with zero energy. We want everybody on the table to be trying to achieve this success. The project bid under budget compared to other schools, and the EUI is expected to hit under a 19. So these are in construction now. They are insulated concrete form schools, and so a great thermal envelope in terms of minimizing air infiltration, and really looking to make huge steps in tying to curriculum, tying to STEM sciences throughout the building use. I think these two projects, you'll hear about them for years and years to come, because they have what I think is the unique opportunity to be used as test beds to immediately similar projects with the same occupant, same user, less than a mile away in the same climate, both capable of zero energy and both wired as living labs with access to data. So it's really an excellent place to implement changes in studies and immediately see the impact they're having, not only on use and test scores, but on energy consumption. So good opportunity there. From there, the project discussion leads over to, there's some images there of the Holabird Elementary School. So there, the next projects roll back to Arlington Public Schools. Really who started this entire deal. Arlington, one of my favorite owners in the country, because not only do they expect great design they require it, and they require the bar to be raised with every project. So their next two projects were the Alice Fleet Elementary School and the Reed Elementary School. And those projects not only pushed the energy efficiency and zero energy as an expectation, they demanded it. Arlington Public Schools put it in the RFP. They required an energy use intensity of 21 or less on previous projects for submittal. They wanted data on projects that were being submitted. They wanted to know where you had implemented health and wellness practices. You know, really a push to increase the health and wellness of the students and the staff, but yet achieve zero energy, not have an energy penalty to those all at the same time. And so continuing to raise the bar, the project was built with some standing seam metal roof, south facing, and 110,000 square foot of space. The Alice Fleet Elementary School is under construction now, so rolling around to being a fantastic school. And then Walter Reed Elementary School. Walter Reed Elementary is a connection to an existing county library. And so they're replacing 110,000 square feet with a 4-story addition to that existing library. It's looking like an EUI of 19 has been set as the energy goal. It's been designed for 100% zero energy, a 550 kW solar array. And the 4-story addition component includes south-facing standing seam metal roof that allows us to accommodate the additional PV. So doing zero energy studies at every phase of the game so that you can understand what space is needed, how it fits, and gets integrated into the design of the project. So we're looking at about a 70% energy cost reduction on that project. And targeted at LEED Gold, it looks like it's right on the line, and we'll see during construction if we can achieve the points that we think we're going to get and get the project to LEED Platinum while staying in budget. Arlington, moving from Discovery Elementary, going to their next 2 to 3 projects, they implemented a power purchase agreement policy for solar photovoltaics arrays. And so their energy manager recently announced all the final details of this, and Arlington has granted us access to publish this as part of this webinar. But they really took the evaluation process to a whole new level on a power purchase agreement. They integrated engineers into looking at past power purchase agreement budgets, looking at other districts that had done PPAs, and they looked at integrating learning opportunities as part of the PPA. So the power purchase agreement company coming on board had to implement the Sphere system as part of their plan. It was really a driver to include learning into the power purchase agreement. And then they put an aggressive schedule on being completely transparent to all those around, but issuing an RFP, having mandatory pre-proposal conferences, getting really national groups to come in and look to participate, and having public hearings, everything that you do in Arlington, and then finally doing a public signing. They were successful in negotiating. I have the numbers. I believe it's a 7.9 cents per kilowatt hour power purchase agreement on a 25-year contract with just under 2 megawatts of system. So the PPA is going to go across 5 schools, and right off the bat, it'll take the Alice Fleet project. While it's still in construction, the power purchase agreement company will install the PPA to the panels, so that to the roof, will install the solar panels to the roof, so that when the kids come on site for day one, they'll be entering into a zero energy school that shows them live how much energy they're consuming and producing. So the second thing that I think was great that Arlington did is they worried about the students in their existing schools. So they used this as a tool to add solar panels through multiple schools, tie learning into those panels, so that every day kids in other schools, or even though there aren't zero energy, are looking at what they're consuming, looking at what they're producing, doing math and homework problems based off the STEM curriculum and the live data coming off the arrays on their building. So Fleet Elementary, we talked about, 2 middle schools, Tuckahoe Elementary, and then Washington Lee High School. We'll all get the solar panels coming off of that. The school push throughout the region then started to make an impact into other groups. The community center in Arlington went through and visited Discovery, looked at the technologies, looked at how systems were simplified, looked at how controls were simplified, and said, what if this could be done on a community center? And Lever Run Community Center is an existing failing building that needed replacement, and VMDO Architects and CMTA was lucky enough to do design of this project. It did bid in budget and is now in construction, and it does include a full solar array that really creates an amazing space. I think the lessons learned off of this project were the opportunities for zero energy to tie to resiliency in a community. So eliminating a generator that's going to have, you know, some carbon costs connected to it, using battery storage. This building doesn't really have a front. It's available and viewed from all 4 sides. And so trying to eliminate that generator, but yet still pick up emergency lighting, using a resiliency plan that could help this building stay open for a very long time based on solar radiation coming through in case of a massive issue and a natural disaster that could shut off power to the region. So a good opportunity to use zero energy for resiliency that's really getting a lot of publicity right now. From there, Washington College Higher Education looked at their Simmons Griswold Center, a small water testing lab facility up outside of Baltimore, and the opportunity for that to become zero energy. So we were able to collaborate with Air St. Gross Architects and GUIPE MEP engineers. The project was a little over budget, and some of that was due to the solar array being a little larger than it really needed to be. So we started, this is about its schematic design, we started a collaboration process that looked at drastic energy reduction, greatly reduced the size of the array, was able to get the entire photovoltaic array onto the roof of the environmental center and off of the site that comes through that area. And you know, the tie to resiliency became very important here as well. This project was elected to go Living Building Challenge, and you've got to look at those goals right up front and incorporate those into the design of the facility. LBC goals include 105% production, not just zero energy, but being a 5% or greater positive impact into the grid. They're also looking at the microgrid and islanding impacts and making those a requirement. So this project has a tiered load delineation that steps through the available energy consuming loads in the building and then tiers those back based on the battery storage capacity. So if you were to lose power, you know, the first group of energy consumption might be used for frequency regulation, then it may go into building loads, then IT loads, and then finally critical loads, lab, freezer loads that you would want to stay on as long as possible. And so by tiering those energy loads, there's a huge resiliency adder that can be acquired coming off of the battery storage system in the building. So next, that push for zero energy schools has come back to the nation's capital. And the RFP that Riley showed was for West Elementary, and DC Public Schools challenged the design community to create their first zero energy school at West Elementary, which is a ground up new elementary school. It's a replacement school. And we were lucky enough to win this project with Perkins Eastman Architects, and really looking at how can this project be a leader for the nation's capital on energy consumption, and tying in the holistic purpose of the school and the learning components. The next project was Eaton Elementary with Cox Gray Spock Architects, and that project hinted towards zero energy, but again gave the design community the opportunity to be challenged to say, okay, could we achieve zero energy in a renovation? And so the Eaton Elementary project is targeted zero energy, again about a 90,000 square foot facility, and is into design now and progressing towards that target. And I think that leads to a quick discussion on the cost of renewable energy and the cost that zero energy has on a project. So on the left, we've tracked PV costs through the last 10, 11 years of zero energy projects. And on the right, we're showcasing what percent of the project budget was needed to acquire zero energy. And as you can see, we're seeing a lot of projects now where the cost for the solar complete array all in has gone down to less than $1.25. A few just bid in the $1.17 to $1.25 range. And we're seeing the cost on the project budget drop to within 1 to 2% of the project budget. Many project estimations are in the 6% or higher range. And we're seeing owners look at zero energy and say, can we, at bid day, achieve zero energy depending on where the bid environment is at that time, and maybe use zero energy as an add alternate or as a potential option, and then seeing what, rolling the dice when the bids come in and seeing where that lands and seeing if they can achieve that zero energy goal while staying in budget. So I think with that, we turn it back over to NBI and open it up for questions.
Okay, we do have a few questions in just a few minutes to go over them, so we'll see what we can get done now. Can you describe how the ventilation system is separate from space conditioning? Does that mean the ventilation air is not distributed through heating and air conditioning air distribution?
Yes, absolutely. And so what I would advise you to look up is a dedicated outside air system, DOAS, referred to as a DOAS system. And if you're separately deriving your ventilation system from your heating and cooling system, you have a much better opportunity to heat and cool a space when it's needed and to separate that from the needs for ventilation. So otherwise, you have to add the heating and cooling and add the ventilation, and the systems are going to run a lot more often and consume more energy. So I would recommend the dedicated outside air system as a driver. It really helps in controlling indoor air quality. So if you're reducing CO2 levels, you're lowering PM2.5, PM10 particles, looking at reduction of some of those things, it helps in doing that and can help in doing that as well. But definitely a driver in drastic energy reduction in budget.
Okay, how was the energy use metered at Discovery Elementary? Per room, per space type, per wing, or just HVAC lighting and plugs building wide?
So a couple standards that I'll reference there. I'll start with 189.1, and which is a high performance building standard that's now evolved into the International Green Building Conservation Code. And that has some great documentation in there about it. And LEED version 4 also has some great documentation. Basically anything that uses 10% or more of the building energy consumption. And so now we've done this for the last really 11 years on our high performance buildings, just to try to understand where energy was really going. And the typical breakouts that we see in a school are going to be plug loads divided into electrical power, IT, and kitchen. So that's sort of the plug and IT process loads components, and then HVAC and lighting.
Okay. What is the payback for net zero systems?
Well, I would put it this way. High performance building design costs less day one on a building that is going to have a good usable life. If you're doing a 5-year developer turnover building, then that would be a different story. But specifically looking at schools, 15-year or more office buildings, multifamily, a lot of those projects, they're looking at having that building for a longer time. You're putting in better systems that have better maintained solutions. High performance buildings that are collaboratively designed will cost shift to provide a better envelope, minimize air infiltration, and use less installed HVAC systems, better design lighting that better disperses light, some of those things. So good documentation on high performance buildings not costing more and potentially costing less depending on the design team. From there, the renewable energy selection is the piece in question. And so how much does that renewable energy component, what percent of the budget does that equate to? And that's where we're seeing a lot of this on projects that have a drastic energy reduction goal. We're seeing that be down to 1 to 2% of the project budget. And 1 to 2% of a project budget can be a lot of money. Some groups are looking at funding that through the fact that it is going to tie to the learning opportunity for a student in the school. And some are looking at, come bid day, can we or can we not afford it? Well, we don't know until then, because the estimate is going to be plus or minus more than that 1 or 2%.
Okay, and it looks like we probably have time for one more question. So are all of these Z&E projects entirely capital funded by customers? What portion of project costs were offset by incentives, financing, or tax credits?
Yeah, great question. So our recent office building that we did for ourselves, we did our portion of the building zero energy. And anybody feel free to email me. The email's on the screen, and I'll send you our pro forma on that system. The tax incentive portion, as being a private owner, we did take advantage of the 30% tax credit for solar and the Marks accelerated depreciation study for doing that. And that dropped it to a 4.2-year return on investment. So great return on investment once the building was designed for zero energy and heading that direction. On the rest of all the projects you're seeing here, there's 3 types of fundings. 3 of the projects in Baltimore, the solar PV was funded from the state. The projects in Arlington, the solar PV, the owner purchased that as part of the design. And so when come bid day on Discovery, it was under budget. They decided to own it, operate it, and to have that be provided by the contractor as part of that project. So we're seeing a lot of projects head that direction if it's achievable on bid day. On the next few projects, they looked at the power purchase agreement. So that's a private entity providing the system and sort of renting your roof for the life of that contract. They went with a 25-year contract, and then they are purchasing power through that contract, through that PPA. Arlington Public Schools is estimating they'll save $4 million on their energy costs for that. So the PPA, the privately owned, and then the purchase by the owner, and then the publicly funded are those 4 examples.
And this is Amy. So the PPA also allows you the opportunity for school districts to take advantage of a tax benefit that they wouldn't have, right? So it allows the private developer to take advantage of that tax credit and reduce the overall costs. So right. The private developer is definitely making money off of that system. The difference is they're taking advantage of the tax credit
that the public owner would not be able to take advantage of.
Mm-hmm. So, good questions.
Okay, well, we've hit the 1 o'clock mark at the end of our time today. So we want to thank Tony for being here and answering all these great questions with all of his content. And we thank you all for being here today.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.